All right, folks, welcome back to the channel here for the doubles disc review, where I will act as the amateur, and my buddy here, Matt Gibbons, a local pro, 980-ish rated, won a few events here at the end of the year, is going to be serving as our pro. That way you can see what the disc will do for you, no matter what your arm speed is. Also, go give Mac a follow here. He puts out some great content on Instagram, his own YouTube channel, and he also gives lessons. So if you are living in the Mobile, Alabama area, or you don't mind traveling, this guy can hook you up with some lessons for a good price. He's helped me out quite a lot, and so I definitely want to shout him out for that as well. But before we get any further, first we need to shout out our partner who helps make these reviews possible.
I'm sure you're surprised a pharmacy sponsored this video, but Saraland Pharmacy is actually the best disc golf store in southern Alabama. They carry a wide variety of discs from all the top manufacturers, including Innova, Discraft, Discmania, and all the Trilogy brands, as well as MVP and Axiom. They also carry plenty of plastic from lesser-known brands, such as Lone Star Disc and Thought Space Athletics. Their pricing is fantastic. And speaking of pricing, they have a very robust used disc section where you can get some lightly used plastic for a fantastic price, and you can also pick up various disc golf equipment that'll help you along the way. So if you're in Mobile County or any of the surrounding areas, or heck, even if you're on the Eastern Shore, definitely pass on by the Saraland Pharmacy, as they have a wide variety of equipment that I'm sure you'll love. It's definitely worth the trip. You certainly won't regret it.
All right, so Mac, why don't you tell us what disc we're going to be reviewing?
So we're going to be looking at the Baobab from above ground level discs. I think that's how you say it. It is a 4013. Not exactly sure if these flight numbers are correct, but if you look at it, kind of looks almost like a bucket lid. Very blunt nose. It's got a little bit of a lip on the edge, kind of like a Stego if you've ever thrown that.
It's a great comparison.
But yeah, it feels interesting, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, so this is in the baseline plastic, which is the woodland plastic, I believe it's called. Basically, AGL, I'll just call them that for short, kind of names all their discs after, I think, plants and trees and like other kinds of wildlife. So they do have some other molds out there, but the Baobab, or Baobab, we're going to pronounce this very many different ways throughout the video, sorry. This is probably the most interesting disc from their lineup, and probably the one that's most people have like at least heard of, I think. And it's because of how unique of a utility disc it is. It is not your standard putt and approach disc. It acts very differently than most putt and approach disc, and Mac and I here will try to show you examples of that throughout the course of this video. So here we go. So the first thing I'm going to show you with this Baobab is how it has some crazy overstability, but in a way that's a little bit different than you might think. What I mean by that is it's going to fight out of what you initially put it into very quickly, but then at the end flight, it kind of just stops, whereas other stuff might dump. So if you're thinking of, let's say, a tilt or a justice or just something very overstable that fights out and then just dumps out at the end, the Baobab doesn't quite do that. It does something a little bit different. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to throw two force over forehands with the Justice, a very overstable mid-range, and I want you to kind of see how this thing flies, and I'm going to show you how the Baobab really differs in its flight. So you see the Justice, I put on some good Anheuser, it fought out, and then it jumped really hard to the right. I'm gonna do it again, another Justice, maybe a little harder. So basically you see the same thing, a little bit more dramatic push to the right because I threw it a little bit harder. But watch what this thing does when I do basically the same thing. Notice it fights out just as hard at the beginning of the Justice flight, but then it just kind of pans and just kind of chills. It doesn't just keep dumping, and it lands very softly. I think that this really makes it a really nice approach disc because you know that you can force it over and you know it's going to fight out, but you also know you're not going to get that crazy dumping ground effect afterwards. I'll show you again. Very gentle.
All right, so now I'm going to show you some examples with the backhand. And so I'm going to touch on a point that I said a little earlier with me saying that I don't think these flight numbers are exactly correct. And the reason for that is because this disc has a lot of mid-flight stability. So what that's going to, convert to is your turn flight number, where it says 1 here. it's gonna have, it's positive one, meaning that it doesn't turn at all, right? It wants to be very stable mid-flight. But what you see when you throw is that once it has that mid-flight stability and it loses speed, it doesn't really fade all that much. So I think this 3 in the fade category is a little bit misleading. I'll kind of try and show you some examples. So I'm gonna throw one kind of hard and flat backhand, and you should see it'll just dump really hard. So you can see that basically went nowhere. And that's because of that mid-flight stability. But now I'm gonna show you the same flight, but I'm gonna throw it kind of high and on anhyzer. And so what you'll see is it'll come out very early, but it won't dump quite as hard as it did mid-flight. So you could see how it kind of just turned there mid-flight, but then once it got to that final neutral stability, it just kind of stalled out instead of fading like a Justice or something like a Zone would. So really interesting, a flight you don't really see all that often. All right, and so last I'm going to show you guys kind of the utility part of this disc, and I would say this is definitionally a utility disc. You're not really ever going to throw this off the tee, I wouldn't think. But I'm going to show you a couple things this could be good for. So first off, I'm going to throw, like Dustin threw earlier, kind of one of those chop over forehands. But what this could be good for is in the winds or just in the woods, you need to throw something very straight, and you don't really have to worry about your angle because this thing almost auto corrects to straight to flat. So it could be good for maybe someone that has a little bit less confidence in their forehand. And I'll kind of show you an example of that. So you see I really came over on that one, but it's still auto-corrected to be flat, and then even got a little bit of skip at the end. So play it out to the left of the basket, you should be good. And next, I'm going to show you the other utility part of this, which is for rollers. Because this nose is so blunt, it's really good for the forehand rollers in that it'll stay straight for a really long time. So if you're stuck in the woods and you really just need to push something far and straight, this could be really useful to you. I'll give you an example. As you can see, it just keeps going. So one thing to know with them is normally when you throw forehand rollers, you kind of have to cut them on an angle, but this one, just because it's so broad nosed, you have to throw it straight up and down and straight into the ground. So it's definitely got some usefulness to it in that aspect.
All right, so to give some final thoughts here on the Baobab by Above Ground Level Disc, which is actually manufactured by Gateway Disc, now that I actually looked at it. First of all, my initial reaction, if I could sum this disc up in like one sentence, is it's a stego that's actually useful instead of being a meme. That's pretty, I feel like that's pretty fair. Like the stego is just, it is a meme. It is just kind of a joke of a disc. Whereas this disc kind of gives you some of the same characteristics of something incredibly overstable, like a tilt or a mutant, but it does it in a putt-and approach form, but with a lot less dump and a little bit more of the overstability being in the middle of the flight rather than towards the end. And you kind of saw some of our different throws that we did, it really is just kind of a specialty disc. You know, you're probably not going to pull it out too often, but you're probably going to be pretty happy to have it when you find yourself in some difficult situations. So that's kind of how I feel about it. What do you think?
Yeah, it's got some things going for it and some things going against it, I think. Things going for it, I think the plastic feels actually really good. So no complaints there. I think it has a very unique flight, unlike really any other discs besides maybe the stego like we talked about before, and a handful of the here or there, but something you're not going to see in a whole lot of discs. It flies very different to any of that. The things that it has against it, I hate how it feels. I am not a fan of it. It doesn't feel good to me. I very much, I'm particular about the way my discs feel, and if they don't feel good in my hand, doesn't matter how good the flight is, I can't throw them. But if that's something you can kind of get over, You know, maybe this is something to try out for yourself, or if you're just looking for something fun to try, something new, you might like it. So
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. It is kind of like a paint lid. It almost reminds me a little bit of a Berg, but not quite as deep, and the upper ridge doesn't go up as much. It's a little bit more shallow. So yeah, that and just the way the parting line feels in the middle, you're either going to like it or you're not. It's one of those ones that you probably want to pick up, kind of feel a little bit before you buy it, which again you can do with our partner over at Saraland Pharmacy. He's got plenty of these, and it could be a great utility disc for you. But yeah, that's going to do it for this review. Catch you next time.
later.